Hello, welcome to the ninth lesson of this chess course. Today we're going to be looking at the king and pawn endgame, basic king and pawn endgame, because the king and pawn endgame is a whole lot to look at. So we're going to be looking at the basic king and pawn endgame that you need to know as a beginner. And funny enough, even intermediate players and master players actually don't know this endgame. They actually find it sometimes very difficult because they miss it, even grandmasters sometimes, right? So it's going to be very, very helpful even if you are an intermediate player, let's say a player within the rating of 1600 and below, right? So this before looking at this pawn endgame, you must make sure that you've looked at the three basic endgame checkmates, which is the king and queen versus the king checkmate, the king and two rooks versus the king checkmate, and lastly the king and rook versus the king checkmate. That was the last. Those were the last things that we looked at in this chess series. Now, if you are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Now let's begin. So the king and pawn endgame usually sometimes can be a little bit complicated, but there are major things that you need to take note of, right? Now, in the king and pawn endgame, right? In the king and pawn endgame, the first thing that you need to understand is what an opposition is. And if you're new to this channel, I'm going to explain what an opposition is again, but I've already explained it in the king and during the king and rook checkmate. Now, an opposition is when both kings are facing each other, right? An opposition is when both kings are facing each other or when both kings are opposing each other. That's why it's called an opposition, right? Now, you all know that the kings can't meet, definitely, right? The kings can't be close to each other. So whenever the king is facing each other, whenever both of the kings are facing each other, it must not actually be this way, right? It can also be this way, right? In this direction, right? Just with one square interval, right? All of the squares that the king is going to be on, right? It's going to be called an opposition. Now, starting with let's say the king is over here. Now we can say both of the kings are in opposition, right? If the king is also over here, both of the kings are in opposition, right? But for the king and pawn endgame, we're going to be mostly looking at this kind of opposition, right? So when the kings are facing each other in this direction. Now, it's very, very, very important to understand what an opposition is before even starting off, right? Because most of the endgame, right, is going to be determined by this opposition. Now, in the opposition, right, there are two ways about it. It's either white have the opposition or black has the opposition. Now in this position, it's white's turn to play. So if it's white's turn to play, black has the opposition. Remember, I repeat, if it's white's turn to play, when both kings are facing each other and it's white's turn to play, black has the opposition. And if it's black's turn to play, white has the opposition. So the person that has the opposition is not the person that is to play. I repeat, the person that has the opposition is not the person that is to play. So in this position, it's an opposition quite all right, but it's the reason white is going to win this game is not necessarily determined by whether it's an opposition or not. But in order positions, it's very, very important. So now the first rule of the king and pawn endgame, this kind of king and pawn endgame, you're going to encounter this kind of position a lot of times when playing, especially when starting out also. Now the king and pawn endgame, right? The king and pawn endgame, as long as for white, right, as long as the king is on the 6th rank, right, that's for white. The king is on the 6th rank and the black king is on the last rank, which is the 8th rank, right? As long as the king is in front of the pawn, it's always going to be a win, irrespective of whose turn is it to play. I repeat, if the king is in front of the pawn on the 6th rank, if the king is in front of the pawn on the 6th rank, irrespective of who is to play, it's going to be a win for white, right? In this position, it's white's turn to play. Now, white can either move to any of the sides, right? So let's say white plays king to d6, right? If black plays this move, right, all we need to do is to push the pawn, right? And if black plays, let's say, this move again, all we need to do is to push the pawn, and now black only has one square to go. Black can't go to this square because of the king. Black can also go here because the pawn is attacking this diagonal, right? And black can also go here, same thing, because of the pawn. The only square that is available for the king is king to f7. So now in this position, white is going to play king to d7. The major reason is that it wants to protect the pawn while reaching the promoting square, right? So in this position, black has to play a move, and let's say black goes here, then you promote into a queen. And this is why I said, if you haven't understood how to do the king and queen checkmate, the king and rook checkmate, or the king and two rook checkmate, you need to watch those videos before proceeding into this. Now we're going to promote to a queen, obviously, because the queen is the strongest piece on the chessboard, right? And then we're going to deliver a checkmate. Let's say black goes here, then that is going to be easy for white, actually. So let's say black goes here, right? We're going to first of all try to cut off the king, right? So we're going to go here, and the king, let's say, plays this move. In our previous video, we looked at two ways to do the king and queen checkmate, right? So we're going to maintain a knight's distance. We're going to maintain a knight's distance from the king, and if the king goes here, we're going to keep on maintaining a knight's distance. If he ever decides to get to the edge of the board, then we just play one move to lock him completely on the edge of the board, and then we start approaching with our king until we eventually do a checkmate by placing the queen in front of the king, right? So this is how you can do the checkmate with the king and queen with the king and pawn, right? When the king is in front of the pawn on the 6th rank, that's 2 squares from the king is 2 squares from the back rank, right? The king is 2 squares from the back rank. Now the next position we're going to look at is when the king is behind the pawn. Now we're going to look at this position from black's perspective, because in this position it's always going to be a draw, irrespective of whose turn it is to play, right? Now this is the first thing that you need to take note of. Now endgame is one of the most difficult parts of chess, and the truth is that the major difference between very strong players and very weak players is the endgame knowledge, right? Some will argue that it's the opening difference. Strong players have very good opening theory, but aside opening theory, if you don't know your endgame, you're definitely going to struggle in becoming a very good player, right? So in this position, right, it's white's turn to play. Now, this is where understanding opposition, it's going to be very important. In this position, white wants to accompany the pawn in promoting, right? White can just play pawn here, because if pawn goes here, then the king just captures. So that is not going to be something that is going to happen, right? So let's say white decides to go here. Now, whenever the king tries to move towards this side, there's only one correct move. Any other move that you play is going to be wrong. If you play this move, what happens? The king then goes over here, stopping your king from going back to e8 and then promoting the pawn and assisting the pawn in becoming the queen. So the only correct move that you have in this position, right, is to get into an opposition. Now, remember, I said if it's white's turn to play, black has the opposition. Now, black needs to get the opposition. Black needs to get into the opposition. If we go pawn push this way, we now go back to e8, and in this position, any move that white plays is going to be a draw. White goes here, this is going to be a classic stalemate, because the king has no square to go to, right? We've already talked about what stalemate is. If you haven't looked at stalemate, then you can go back to the video and look at stalemate, right? So in this position, the pawns are attacking those two squares, so the king can't go and the king can't move forward. So this is a stalemate. Now the other option for white is to just move away, and then this is going to be a stalemate due to insufficient material to do a checkmate, right? So this is not going to eventually lead into a win. Now it's still the same thing. If white decides to go through this side, then you go here, right? Then if you go pawn push, you still go back, and it's going to be a stalemate. Now take note, I said when the king is behind the pawn, two steps from the back rank, or 2 steps from the queen in square, right? If the king is behind the pawn this way, then it's going to be a draw. But if this was the position, sorry. So but if the king is in front of the pawn, it's going to be win. It's going to be a win irrespective of whose turn it is to play. If it's behind the pawn, it's still going to be a draw irrespective of whose turn it is to play. So always take note. So don't give up when you get into an end game when you're down a pawn. Don't easily give up, right? Your opponent might not still know how to play this, and he might eventually blunder. Sometimes even in a winning position, they can eventually still blunder. Like for instance, it's white's turn to play. White plays this automatically becomes a draw, and it's actually a very funny move, right? It's actually a very funny move that you might think people will not play, but this is actually played sometimes, right? By complete amateurs. So if you are in this position, don't be in a haste to give up, right? Because your opponent can blunder. But once he plays this and you go here and he plays this, he probably knows his stuffs. And if he goes here and then this, then you can't eventually go back here. You have to move away, and then he eventually promotes into a queen. So but if he goes back here, how can you draw this game? By getting the opposition. Now it's white's turn to play. So you can see if he moves over here, you can still decide to get into the opposition, or better still, attack the pawn. Right? He goes back here, and then you always just stay behind the pawn, because whenever the king decides to move forward, you get into the opposition. If he doesn't want to move forward, if he goes here, right, you just still dance around the pawn, behind the pawn. You must make sure you're behind the pawn, right? If he goes here, don't do this, because now it's going to be a loss, I think. Yeah. So if he goes here, whenever he moves here, then go in front of the king. If you push the pawn, move back, right? He goes here, and you still keep on repeating the same thing. Whenever he moves forward, then you place the king in front, right? And this is how you can secure a draw as black, even being down a pawn, right? So these are the two important positions that you need to take note of for the start. Now the next position that we're going to look at is this position, and this position is a draw. In this position, it's white's turn to play, but the thing is that what can white play, right? White is not having the opposition. White is not having the opposition. Remember, if white is having the opposition, it means it's black's turn to play, and they are facing each other, right? So if they were facing each other and it's white's turn to play, then probably it's going to be a win for white. Now in this position, white decides to, let's say, play something like this, right? And white decides to play something like this. It's very simple. You attack the pawn, and if he tries to protect the pawn, you still move back, right? You still move back. You don't want to make a mistake of giving him the opposition, right? Just you might still go here, and it might still be a draw, but just have this at the back of your mind. You don't want to allow him get the opposition, because it's kind of tricky. You might eventually blunder the position. So always stay behind the pawn unless the king moves forward, and then you get the opposition. So now we're just going to move back. If he goes forward this way, we go here, and if he pushes the pawn, we do the same thing. He tries to go here, we just move backwards. He moves here. Don't make the mistake of going here. So we're just going to go back, and if we go here, if he sees that you know your stuff, then you try and get the opposition. If he pushes, it's still the same thing, and you can see we get back into the previous position that we looked at, whereby the pawn is on the 6th rank and the king is behind the pawn. And this is an automatic draw. Remember, don't play this. If not, this is going to be your end. Yeah, because after this, we go here, this, and this is a loss because you're not going to get your draw again. So whenever this happens, right, always stay behind the pawn unless the king goes forward. Then you get into the opposition. Now you're the one having the opposition because it's white's turn to play. And if he goes here, then you still repeat the same thing, right? You can either go here or here. Anyone is actually still going to be a draw, right? If you go here, if he comes here, then this, if he goes pawn push, you go to e8, and then this is going to be a stalemate, or he's going to lose the pawn. So this was the beginning of the position. Remember, this position with the pawn in the center is the draw, right? This position with the pawn in the center is a draw because the king is not in opposition, right? Now, even if it's white's turn to play, this position is still going to be a draw, right? And yeah, let's look at that. Let's say it's yeah, okay, so in this position it was white's turn to actually play, right? White played this and it was a draw. So even if it's black's turn to play, it's still going to be a draw. And what is going to be the move that you're going to play? You're going to get into the opposition. Yeah, I think this should be a draw. Yeah, definitely a draw. So after this move, right, what can white play? White decides to push the pawn. You go behind the pawn and it's still the same thing, right? It's your turn to play. You go here. If it goes here, you get into the opposition. Opposition. You're going to hear the word opposition like a million times in this video. And this is because I want it to actually sink in to your head. Okay, now after this move, if pawn push check, you go behind the pawn, and then this happens, and you just stay behind the pawn unless he gets to the 6th rank, right? If he goes back, then you go back your thing, right? Ignore what he's doing. He's trying to set tricks on you, thinking that you don't know. If he tries to go here, attack the pawn, he has to go back and then move back again, right? And you can see this is a pawn endgame that many beginners actually miss out, right? So make sure that you understand this very, 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 very well, right? So, and after this, you just go here, pawn push, go here, and then this is going to be a stalemate, right? And the next position that we're going to look at is this position. Now, this position is actually very, very tricky, right? This position is very, very tricky. Whenever you have the pawn on the flank this way, right, either the H or the A file, most of the times is a draw. Right now, in this position, it's whites to play, but whites to play, only one move works in this position, right? Only one move works in this position. And guess what the move is? To get an opposition. If you decide to push the pawn here, it's going to be a draw because black king goes here, and the idea is just to get to this square, and it's going to eventually lead into a stalemate. If you want to stop him, he's going to get into an opposition again. And you can see what I mean by opposition. Now, let's say you can see you can't actually even come out. If you try to push the pawn, he goes here. And now if you try to move out so that your pawn is going to move, he's going to go here. And do you see what is happening? Pawn push check, he goes here. And if you go here, it's going to be a stalemate. If you decide to move away, you're going to lose the pawn, and it's going to be a draw due to insufficient material. So let's go back to this position. Now, what is the move if it's not going to push the pawn? It's to get into the opposition, going king to g7. Now, you can see you've successfully stopped the king from moving forward, and now the king is going to guard your pony as it eventually goes to h8 to queen in style. Now, after this, pawn to h5, king to f5, pawn to h6, king to g5, you go pawn to h7, and then, yeah, it's going to be a win. And you know how to convert this into a win from here, right? So now, this is how you're going to win this position as white. Now, if you ever get into this kind of position whereby your pawn is at the flank, make sure you're opposing your opponent's king in order to stop him from getting into this little hole over here. Because once he gets in front of your pawn, it's going to be a checkmate. In this position, it doesn't matter whether, it doesn't matter whether, let's say, let's say you don't, let's say you play this move and he goes here, and you go here, he goes here, you go here, and goes here. Now, remember I said if the king is in front of the pawn, it's a win. That doesn't work when the pawn is at the edge of the board, right? That doesn't work when the pawn is at the edge of the board. So the pawn has to be at least in the middle of the board in any of these squares before it can work. Once it's at the edge of the board, once it's at the A file or the H file, it's going to be an automatic draw, right? Because just look at this position. Now, if black king goes here, white king goes here, black king goes back, pawn push here, pawn push, and then here, and then stalemate, right? So this is what can happen. So I repeat again, whenever you have a pawn and you have a king that is close to your opponent's king, always try to stop the king from moving close to your pawn if the pawn is on the flank file, right? This king is serving as a shield from stopping the king to get close to the pawn. If the king tries to get close to the pawn, it's not going to get there on time, right? So this is how you win this kind of position. Now, what if it's black's turn to play? I've already explained that. If it's black's turn to play in this position, what happens? This is the only move that draws the game. You want to try and run and get into this square. If he pushes the pawn, you go here, and then you've gotten into your dream position, a draw, right? But what happens if he stops you from going to h7? Then you get into opposition with the king, right? Just maintain these two squares, right? These two squares, and you're going to secure yourself a draw. Now, if he goes pawn push, you go down. Don't go up, because if you go to f6, now he goes here. Oh, it's actually still a draw. Sorry, actually still a draw. Because you're just going to go king to g5. You can see even this position is confusing me a little bit. So that's why I said it's very good for people within this rating too. Now, after this move, if you go up, yeah, he goes here, then you have to go back. And then if he goes here, you go here. If he goes here, you keep on going there till he eventually gets a draw due to 3-4 repetition. Or maybe after this move, you go here, it's going to be a stalemate because the king can't move to g8. Neither can the king move to h7. So this position is going to be declared as a draw based on stalemate. Yeah. Now, let's look at the next position. This is the next position. And remember, I said whenever the king is on the 6th rank and is in front of the pawn, right? Now, in this position, white is to play. White can decide to get in front of the pawn. Irrespective of whose turn it is to play, it's going to be a win for white, right? Now, white goes to e6. Always remember, right? White goes to e6. Now, black plays this move. You push your pawn, right? Black goes here, and then you move the king. Any direction is okay. You move the king here, you go pawn push. You go here, he goes here, and then you go pawn push. If he goes to d7, then king goes to f7, and then you promote your pawn into a queen, right? Now, this is the position, right? All you need to do is to get into the opposition. Whenever you reach a king and pawn endgame, even if there are lots of pawns, you must always think about opposition, right? We're going to get to a point whereby we start dealing with more complicated endgames, so you must always know this, right? So as white, you want to get into an opposition. Don't make a mistake of going here because it's going to be a draw. This is the only move that probably is going to blunder the game for you. And maybe something like this, it's going to be a blunder. After this, it goes here and this. Okay, it's not going to be a blunder, but in this position, what I'm trying to say is always get into the opposition, right? Because when your king is on the 6th rank, doesn't matter whose turn it is to play, it's going to be a win for you, right? Now, let's move on to the next position with black to play. Yeah, so I said in this position, even if it's black's turn to play, let's say black goes here, stopping you from going here. All you need to do is to push your pawn. You push your pawn, he can't move up. He can go here, but if he goes here, then you go here. And if he goes here, like I said, it's still a win for white. If he moves this way, try to get into a position, it's going to push, and then you have to move out, and then white is eventually going to queen again. So it doesn't matter whether it's black's turn to play or white's turn to play. It's always going to be a win as long as the king is on the 6th rank of the board, right? Now, this is the next position. Actually, yeah. So in this position is a win for white. If it's white's turn to play, it's a win. And I think in this position, only one move works. Once you play, a lot of players actually will think of playing this move. Ooh, I have a pass pawn. I want to queen my pass pawn. And then they push the pawn, and unfortunately, this becomes a draw. So sorry. But this eventually becomes a draw, and we're going to look at why the position is going to be a draw, right? Now, but let's try and find the best move. What is the best move? Always get your king in front of the pawn. So right here, we go play this move, right? Moving the king forward, right? And if he tries to go here, what happens? Get into the opposition. Now the king is in the front of the pawn. If the king moves over here, you go towards the side. Let me take it back. If the king moves over here, you go towards the side, right? And the idea is that if he decides to move down, you have a check, and there's nothing he can do. If he moves up to b6, then king goes to d6. If he moves over here, you just push the pawn, and if he tries to go here, you've gotten into the same position where your king is on the 6th rank, and this is going to be a win for you again, right? If the king goes here, then you just go here, and then pawn push, right, check, pawn c7 check, and then eventually you promote to a queen and deliver your king and queen checkmate, right? Let's go back. Now, after this move, if he decides to go here, you go here. And what if he doesn't go there? What if he goes here? Still the same thing. Get into the opposition. Now, if you go here, I think this might be a blunder. Yes, this might be a blunder because now you're giving him the opposition. This is why I said in the middle of the board or anywhere, opposition matters a lot. And this position is going to be a complete draw because you gave black the opposition. It's white's turn to play. You want to have the opposition, and if white wants to have the opposition, he must make sure that it's black's turn to play. And that is why instead of going here, we're gently waiting for him to get over here so we can get the opposition, right? Now if he decides to go here, we still get the opposition. If he decides to go here, we still get the opposition. If he decides to go here, we don't want to go here because it's still going to be a blunder. What are we going to play? Move the king up, right? And whenever he decides to play this, we get into the opposition. Please take note. Always think of who's going to have the opposition. Is it me or white? If you are going to have the opposition, then it must be your opponent's turn to play, and that's going to be good for you. But if your opponent has the opposition and it's your turn to play when the kings are this way, that's going to be likely a draw, right? So now let's move back into this position. Yeah, so this is how to win this position. You just move up one step to d4, and if the king ever tries to come close, then just get the opposition, get into the opposition, and you're going to be good to go. Move to the side. If he goes here, don't be in a rush to push the pawn because you're going to give him the opposition. Get back into the opposition. Now what happens if he pushes the pawn? It becomes a draw because now he has the opposition. Always take note, you don't want him to get the opposition, right? After this move, if he goes here, you have a waiting move, which is pawn push. But if you play pawn push, it becomes a draw because now he gets the opposition. It's your turn to play and the kings are facing. That's why you want to go here. Right now, the only opposition you can have is this, and it doesn't, the opposition has to be this way, not sideways, right? And after this, you just push pawn. This stops him from going here or here. If he decides to move back, you push the pawn. If he decides to move back, don't. Okay, yeah, you can go here. You can go here, yes, because it's on the 6th rank, and it doesn't matter whose turn it is to play. Because after this, if you go here, pushes the pawn. If he goes here, yeah, if he goes here, it's gonna try to do a trick, and this, my friends, it's going to be a stalemate. king has nowhere to go. So in this kind of position, when the king goes here, just simply move the king this way, right? And if he goes here, then move the king this way, and then you have successfully promoted your pawn, right? And that's how to do this. Now, if it's black's turn to play, this position is actually going to be a draw, right? This position is going to be a draw, because if pawn goes forward, then what happens? Okay, it's black's turn to play, sorry. Black is going to play. Yeah, if black goes here, he gives white the opposition. So what is going to happen? Black is going to play this move, I think, right? This should be a draw, because if he goes here, then we move forward. Yes. Now, let's see what happens if black goes here. This is going to be a loss, because black is now giving white the opposition, right? So you can see the best move in this position is going to be king here. Just waiting, both of them. This is just it's now looking like it's no longer a game of chess, but it's a game of opposition, right? It's like the name of the game is now is opposition. Who has the opposition, right? Now, if the black decides to go here, white decides to go here, this is how he's going to get his draw, right? If he decides to go here, then this is how white is going to, sorry, black is going to get his draw also, right? If black decides to go here, what happens? We just move one step forward. If he decides to go here, we always get the opposition. And the idea is that now, if he pushes the pawn, remember, we go behind the pawn. If he pushes the pawn again, we don't move this way. Because, okay, yeah, we can actually move this way, but don't move that way. There's a reason why I'm saying that. So just go back this way, and if he goes here, then get back your position, pawn push, go here. If he goes here, move back, and then wherever he goes, you can see we've gotten to the second position that we looked at, whereby the king is behind the pawn, and this position is going to be a theoretical draw for black. Now let's move on to the next position. Okay, take a look at this position. It's white's turn to play. White has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all of the moves, out of all of the moves, only one move is correct, right? Out of all of the moves, only one move is correct. Now, what move will that be? Okay. If the king decides to go here, ladies and gentlemen, this is an opposition. And white doesn't have the opposition. Black has the opposition. And you all know what that means. Black has the opposition, white is to play. White moves this way. Black king goes to e3, and then if he goes here, then black king goes here, and this is a win, irrespective of whose turn it is to play. If white decides to go here, we push the pawn. If I go back, it doesn't matter, because after this, we push the pawn. King goes to d1. We go pawn push, and after this, king goes to e2, and then this is going to be a king and a queen, and it's going to be easy to do a checkmate. So we don't go here because he gets the opposition. What happens if we go here? Still the same thing. He moves forward and gets the opposition. You don't want to give your opponent the opposition, because once you give him the opposition, that's the end of the game, ladies and gentlemen. So what is going to be now the best move in this position? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Both of these moves gives the opposition. So what is going to be the best move? Now, again, if you play this move, it's still going to be a loss. You know why? Because now, wait, is it a loss? Yeah, because now, if white plays this move, right, you decide to get into an opposition, what are we going to play? We're going to play pawn push, and it's actually a draw. Okay, wait. Okay, if it's white's turn to play, I think this is also going to be a draw. Yeah, this is a draw. Okay, yeah, this is a draw. This is the only move that draws the game. Yes, this is the only move that that is the only move that draws the game. This is the only move that draws the game. If you decide to go here, it's going to be a blunder. Yeah. So the only move that draws the game, if you go here, it's still going to be a blunder, because now you don't have the opposition. It's going to go here. If you go here, it's going to get into the opposition, right? Same thing if you decide to go this way. So the only move that draws this game is just moving here. And the idea is that if it goes forward, you have the opposition. If it goes this way, you have the opposition. If it goes this way, you can still go here. Still going to be a draw, because whenever he tries to get close to the pawn, you get to your opposition. But in this position, I think you can still go here. It's still going to be a draw. If it pushes the pawn, right, you go towards this side. And if it goes here, you move here. And now if it pushes the pawn, it's not going to be a win, because what is it? The pawn is now in front of the king, obstructing the king. And meanwhile, it's supposed to be the other way around. The king is supposed to be in front of the pawn. And this becomes an automatic draw. This becomes an automatic draw, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let's look at this position if it's black's turn to play. If it's black's turn to play, it's still going to be a draw. If black goes here, you get the opposition, and it's going to be a draw. If black goes here, what happened? What is the move that wins the opposition? If you said king to c2, then you're absolutely right. This is going to still be a draw. If you decide to go here, all you need to do is to go pawn push, king to d2, and then after this, it's going to be a draw. He pushes the pawn, still the same thing, and this is going to eventually lead into a draw. And that is it. These are the major basic endgame checkmates that you need to know when starting off, right? Once you understand this concept, it means that you fully understand what opposition is, and then you're going to easily understand when we get into complicated endgames, right? Why moving king sometimes in like a very like you're probably going to ask yourself, why is the king going to move in this position? The idea is because in the next 5 moves you want to end up having the opposition, and if you can't figure this out, or if you don't understand what an opposition is in this kind of position, you're definitely not ever going to understand it in that kind of position. So we've come to the end of this lesson. So yes, see you in the next lesson. Please don't forget to like, and if you haven't subscribed for more videos, don't forget to also subscribe. Bye.